Good morning, class. Today we will start with the topic sexual reproduction. We have completed asexual and vegetative reproduction in the previous classes. Now, what is sexual reproduction? Sexual reproduction involves formation of the male and female gametes either by the same individual or by different individuals of the opposite sex. The same individual can also have or possess both male and female parts. So, the animals or the organisms that possess both male and female reproductive structures in the same plant are called as bisexual. And when the male and female reproductive structures are present on different plants, they are called as the unisexual. Now, when we talk about fungi, as we all know, the fungi is having a thallus. Thallus means their body is not differentiated into stem, roots, and leaves. So, the word homothallic and monoecious will be used in place of fungi in case of fungi, but the term uh, bisexual is used for higher plants. Then the ones, those fungi that possess the different thallus having male and female reproductive structures respectively are called as the heterothallic and dioecious. And these terms refers to as the unisexual condition in higher plants. Now, in flowering plants, the unisexual male flower is staminate, that is, bearing stamens, while the female is pistillate or bearing pistils. But when the same flower possess or the same plant possess both male and female flowers, it is called as hermaphrodite. But there is also some animals that have this type of differentiation. So when one individual or one animal possess uh, one only one type of male reproductive part in one and the female reproductive part in the other, it is also called as unisexual, like the higher plants, and same vice versa. Those animals possess both male and female in the same plant or the same body. They are called as the bisexual. The list of some unisexual are cockroaches. We are talking about the lower animals, and some bisexual ones are the earthworms, sponge, fasciola or tapeworm, and the leech. So now the different phases. The different phases of life are the birth phase, when the organism has just taken birth or just is newly formed. Then comes the juvenile phase. After the birth phase, some amount of growth occurs, and then the juvenile phase comes. Juvenile phase is the phase in which the reproductive maturity is not still attained, but body is preparing itself for attaining sexual maturity. So it is also a vegetative phase. In angiosperm, the end of vegetative phase completes as soon as they start flowering. So that means flowering is the reproductive phase in the case of higher plants that are angiosperms. Then comes the senescent phase. The senescent phase is the phase in which the end of reproductive phase occurs. That is a gradual decreasing of various metabolic activities, and uh, the body is growing old and old and losing its ability to reproduce. Then comes the annual and biannual plants. What are annual and biannual? The plants in which flowering is just once or twice a year. In annual, the flowering is just in a span of 1 year, the flowering occurs only once. And in biannual, the flowering occurs twice in 1 year. So in these plants, vegetative reproduction and senescent phase are very much early. They are being identified very early, as the flowering occurs in very less span of time. But there are some examples like bamboo. In this, flowering occurs only one in the whole lifespan of, for example, if the lifespan of bamboo is 50 to 100 years, then the flowering occurs just once, and they bear lots of flowers, and then they stop flowering. So there are some flowers found in the Kerala region, the Tamil Nadu region, that are the Neelkunthi or the Strobilanthus. They occur always in 12 years once. So last they occur in the year 2006. So now, nahin, then they must have be occurred in the 2018, and they're gonna be occurred in 2030. So now that makes the lifespan of these the flowering in these plants, in these flowers, to be 12 years. And with the flowering in them, the complete Tamil Nadu region in the hilly areas, they became blue in color. Now the reproductive cycles in animals. Reproduction in animals is seasonal. That is, bird lay eggs only in specific season. But in the poultry farms, you must have seen that the reproduction cycle goes on and on. So this is the intervention of human beings. They interrupt in the cycles that occur in these animals. So the cycles that occur in the non-primates is called the oestrus cycle, as well as the primates. The cycle that is occurring is called the reproductive cycle. Basically, it is called as the menstrual cycle. So, what are primates and non-primates? That's the question. So, the primates are those which have developed very much larger brain size, as well as they are using their hands, and the cycle is complex. And all those mammals that does not come into, all those animals basically that does not comes into the category of primates are called as the non-primates. So, the egg-laying birds may be considered as the non-primates, and the primates includes human beings, gorillas, chimpanzees, all this. So, what is oestrus and menstrual cycle? It is the reproductive cycle of non-primates. Examples: cow, dogs, rats, tigers, etc. These are animals that are reproductively active only in specific season. Hence, these are called as the seasonal breeders. Now, the menstrual cycle, it is the reproductive cycle of the primates like monkeys, apes, and the humans. They are reproductively active throughout their reproductive phase. Hence, they are also called as the continuous breeders. Now, the events that occurs in the process of sexual reproduction. After the attainment of maturity, all sexually reproducing organisms exhibit events and processes that have remarkable fundamental similarities. Even though the structures associated with sexual reproduction are indeed very different, the events of sexual reproduction, though elaborate and very much complex, they follow a very common sequence. So the sexual reproduction is characterized by the fusion of male and female gametes. Then occurs the formation of zygote, and thereafter comes the process of embryogenesis. So we have divided these different phases of sexual reproduction into main three headings, that is the pre-fertilization events, the fertilization, as well as the post-fertilization events. So what happens in the pre-fertilization event? The pre-fertilization events includes the all those events of sexual reproduction that are occurring prior to the fusion of gametes. So the two main pre-fertilization events are the gametogenesis and gamete transfer. So what is gametogenesis now? Gametogenesis is the process of formation of male and female haploid gametes. Gametes are always haploid. This should be kept in mind. How they are haploid, that we'll discuss later when we'll discuss the division. In some algae, the two gametes are so similar in appearance that it is not possible to categorize them into male and female gametes. So these are also called as the homogametes or the isogametes. So when the two gametes that are formed are morphologically as well as physiologically similar, they are also called as the isogametes, and this mainly occurs in lower plants, that is fungi. Then comes the heterogametes. In a majority of sexually reproducing organisms, the gametes produced are of two morphologically distinct types. In such organisms, the male gamete is called the antherozoid or the sperm, and the female gamete is called the egg or ovum. So these are heterogametes. They are different morphologically. Morphologically means in outer appearance. Then comes the sexuality in organisms. I told you this, the homothelic or the monoecious condition, in which it is the bisexual condition in fungi and plant. It is in this both male and reproductive structures are present in same individuals. The reverse occurs in the heterothelic, and male flower is called staminate, that bear only stamens, and female is called pistillate, that bears only the pistils. These are some examples of monoecious. The example of monoecious is cucurbita, and example of dioecious is the papaya as well as the day palm. Now, sexuality in animals. Hermaphrodite or bisexual animals, these are those animals having both male as well as female reproductive organs in the same body. So these include the earthworm, sponges, and leech. Then the unisexual, they have different individuals that have male, as this is like you can see, for example, in lion, this is the male and this is the female. So it bears the male reproductive part and this bears the female reproductive part. So these are the unisexual animals. Now we'll talk about the gamete transfer. uh, After the gametes are formed, male and female gametes must be physically brought together to facilitate fusion or fertilization. Now, in a majority of organisms, male gamete is motile and the female gamete is stationary. This is because of the reason mostly the male gamete is smaller and also possess the flagella or cilia that helps in their movement, as well as female gamete is larger in size and cannot move from one place to another. So there are also some exceptions. There are a few fungi and algae in which both types of gametes are motile. There is a need for medium through which the male gametes move. Now the medium is mostly water. In several simple plants like algae, bryophytes, and pteridophytes, water is the medium through which the gamete transfer takes place. So, a large number of male gametes, however, fail to reach the female gametes. So, in order to compensate this loss, the male gametes are formed in a very large amount, so that even if they are lost in the process of transfer to the female gametes, there is still a chance of reproduction. Then in seed plants, pollen grains are the carriers of male gametes and the ovule have the egg. So pollen grains produced in anthers, therefore they have to be transferred to the stigma before it can lead to the process of fertilization. What happens in the bisexual? In bisexual, self-fertilizing plants, for example, peas, transfer of pollen grains to the stigma is relatively easy. So when the bisexual flower is present, bisexual means having both male and female parts in the same flower, in the same plant, then the same plant contains anther where the pollen grains or the male gametes are producing, and same plant contains the stigma. So stigma is the female part. So whenever the attainment of maturity is done by the pollen grains, they are matured to be transferred, then it is very easy because the anthers are relatively of higher in length, and whenever they are matured to being supplied to the stigma, they just are they tilt their pollen tube and all the pollen grains are fallen onto the surface of the stigma and the self fertilization occurs. That is the reason Mendel chose the pea plant for his experiment, so that the fertilization is very much easy in these. Now what occur, this is, you can see, the bisexual self fertilizing pollen plants. This is the case of bisexual in which both stamen, the anther and the stigma are present same plant, and that's why the self-fertilization is the case. Whereas in the unisexual, cross-fertilization is done by the birds, and the pollination we'll discuss later, but the bird pollination is also called as ornithophily. Now the fertilization, the second event after pre-fertilization. And what happens in the fertilization now? It is also called as the syngamy. Fertilization is mainly of two types, the syngamy as well as the conjugation. Conjugation is basically performed by lower organisms like unicellular, for example, paramecium, and also in bacteria. So, conjugation is something that we'll discuss later, but let me give you a brief description of it. In conjugation, a temporary tube is formed between uh, two different individuals. One is considered to be male or the donating one, and the other is considered to be the recipient or the female. So the pronucleus is transferred from the male to the female, and in this way the process of conjugation is occurred. It is also a type of fertilization. Now, the syngamy. The most vital event of sexual reproduction is perhaps the fusion of gametes. This process is called the syngamy. Syngamy results in the formation of a diploid zygote. The term fertilization is also often used for this process. The term syngamy or fertilization are frequently used through, though interchangeably. So both of them can be used. They both have possess the same meaning. Now, what happens if the syngamy does not occur? However, it has to be mentioned that In some organisms like rotifers, honeybees, and even some lizards and birds, the female gamete undergoes development to form new organisms without fertilization. This phenomenon is called parthenogenesis. I told you the parthenogenesis in the previous class, taking the example of honeybee, that how the female uh, gametes are only involved in the formation of the new individual. That means there is no fusion of the male and female gametes in this. So that's why the formed individual by the process of parthenogenesis is always haploid, because the haploid female gamete is taking part in this. Now there are two types of reproduction: the internal as well as external. What is external? In the process of external fertilization, it occurs mainly in the aquatic organisms such as majority of algae and fungi, as well as some amphibians. Syngamy occurs in the external medium, that is water. And syngamy refers in water refers to the external fertilization that is outside of the body of the main organism. So organisms exhibiting external fertilization shows great synchrony between the sexes and release a large number of gametes into the surrounding media. This is the case, as I told you, that a large number of gametes has to be produced, because if the fertilization is done in water, so as to uh, reduce the chance of loss of these gametes, and fertilization can be in broader sense. Then what is internal fertilization? In internal fertilization, the fusion of male and gametes occurs in the inside of the body, and it is occurring mostly in the terrestrial organisms belonging to higher animals such as reptiles, birds, mammals, and in a majority of plants. So there are some disadvantages of the external fertilization, that are the organisms produced have to be in large in number, because there is a chance of loss in the gametes as it is occurring in the water. The predators also destroy the eggs and offspring because they are outside the body of the organism, and the survivability of rate of the offspring to adult is very much less due to the presence of so many predators in the water. Then we start the post-fertilization events. What includes in the post-fertilization events? That is the formation of diploid zygote, and it is universal. It is a universal process in all sexually reproducing organisms. In organisms with external fertilization, zygote is formed in the external medium, usually water, whereas in those exhibiting internal fertilization, zygote is occurring inside the body of the organism. So now the further development of the zygote depends on the type of cycle the organism has and the environment it is exposed to. An organism belonging to algae and fungi, the zygote develops a thick wall that is resistant to desiccation and damage. This is in order to protect itself from any predator, and it undergoes a period of rest before the process of germination. And in this period of rest, it absorbs some amount of nutrition and is preparing its body for the process of germination. Then in organisms with haplontic cycle, you must have read the haplontic and diplontic cycle in your 11th class, so we'll not go through them. Zygote is the vital link that ensures continuity of the species between organism of one generation and the next. That is, zygote is a connecting link between the two species. That is, one species is producing the zygote, and that zygote is resulting into the new individual or the offspring. So every sexually reproducing organism, including human beings, begin life as a single cell, that is the zygote. Now the embryogenesis occurs. What happens in embryogenesis? It is the process of the development of embryo. Genesis means development or the formation. Uh, the embryo is developed from the zygote. During embryogenesis, zygote undergoes cell division. The cell division that it undergoes here is mitosis. And then after cell division, the cell differentiation occurs. We all know that mitosis is a process in which the number of cells are remaining constant. So cell division is basically done in order to increase the number of cells in the developing embryo. And then after the cell division is almost done and the embryo has attained its size that is suitable, then afterwards the cell differentiation occurs. And what happens in cell differentiation? In cell differentiation, the groups of cells that have attained maturity in the process of cell division, they are now modified to form specialized tissues and organs to form an organism. Now there are some organisms that are categorized basis on whether the development of the zygote takes place outside the body of the female part or inside. That is, that whether they are laying fertilized eggs or the unfertilized eggs or giving birth to young ones. So they are basically of two types, the oviparous as well as the viviparous. The oviparous animals are those, for example, reptiles and birds that have a calcareous shell. Calcareous shell means the shell is made up of calcium carbonate, and they are laid in safe environment. After a period of incubation, young ones hatch out. On the other hand, in the viviparous animals, the majority of animals, including human beings, the zygote develops into a young one inside the body of the female organism. So after attaining a certain age of growth, the young ones are delivered out of the body of the female organism, and because of proper embryonic care and protection, the chances of survival of young ones in case of viviparous organisms are more, because it is happening, all the process are occurring inside the body of another organism, that is the female body. So now we'll talk about the post-fertilization events in the flowers. Before discussing the post-fertilization in flowers, we'll discuss the different parts of a flower. So what is flower? Flower are the symbolic of beauty, love and tranquility. They form the soul of the world because they are something that is considered to be very pure, or they are very beautiful. The flowers are also divided into annual as well as biennial. The floriculture is the branch of ornamental horticulture concerned with growing and marketing of flowers and ornamental plants. So now we'll discuss the parts of a typical flower. The reproductive structures of the flower are called as the endoecium and gynoecium, and the male reproductive structure is androecium. It consists of a whorl of stamens. In the picture, you can see the diagram. It is a section cut between transverse section cut so that the parts of the flowers can be seen very easily. The different parts of the flower are best understood by referring the structure of a typical flower. A flower is generally borne on the lateral side of the peduncle at the node in the axil of a leaf-like structure called bract. So the flower is arising from the bract. The bract is mainly for the protection purpose when the flower is in the bud condition. A flower arising in the axil of a bract is called bracteate, and if the bract is absent at the base of the flower is called as ebracteate. So now flower is now differentiated into two, bracteate as well as ebracteate, on the basis of presence or absence of a bract. Now the stalk of the flower is called pedicel. This is the pedicel, the stalk. The stalk is exposed into the outside, and it is mainly used for the positioning of the flower during the process of pollination. And there are some flowers which do not possess the pedicel. They are called the sessile, and the ones that are possessing the pedicel are called the pedicellate flowers. Now flowers is now again divided. So sometimes there is a very short pedicel. Now the term which is intermediate between the pedicel and sessile is the subsessile. That is, the pedicel is present but is not very long, and it is also not completely absent. So the term is now subsessile. This is can be said to be a subsessile as shown in the diagram, because the pedicel is present but it is not very much longer in size. Now, in some flowers, two small leaf bracts are also present on the flower pedicel called the bracteoles. If the pedicel is present, then in some plants there is the presence of bracteoles arising from the pedicel. These are flowers which are called as bracteolate, and if the bracteoles are again absent, then it is called the ebracteolate. The pedicel has an upper swollen portion called the thalamus. This is the swollen portion of the pedicel. That is called as the thalamus, and the thalamus is also referred to as the receptacle. Thalamus is considered as an axis of the flower. It bears four types of flower or floral leaves arranged in successive whorls. So what are the four types of whorls that are arising from the thallus? These are the sepals, petals, stamens and carpels. In group or collectively, these whorls are called as corolla. When we are talking about one single unit, it is called as the sepal, petal, stamen and carpels. But when we are talking about a bunch or a group of these words, they are called calyx, corolla, androecium and the gynoecium. So androecium and gynoecium, as I told you already, are referred to as the reproductive structures. The androecium is the male reproductive structure and the gynoecium is the female reproductive structure. Now the single unit, stamen. Stamen is a cylinder, stalk-like, it is also called as filament. At the tip of it contains a bilobed anther. This is the anther. It is bilobed, means it is divided into two and consists of two lobes. The stamen in a flower consists of parts, two parts basically, the longer narrow called the filament and the upper broader bilobe called the anther. Then the proximal end, or the what is proximal? The end present on the above side or the outer side. The proximal end of the filament is attached to the thalamus or petal of the flower. The number of length of stamens vary in different species. What is the structure of anther? Now, the TS of anther consists of four-sided microspongia, two in each lobe. So there are four microspongia, two present in each lobe. I told you there are two lobes present, and when two are present in each lobe, that makes microspongia to be four in number. Microspongia develops into pollen sac. Inside the pollen sac, the pollen grains are present. This is the clear picture of the typical stamen that consists of anther. It is bilobed and the long filament. Now this is divided into four. The four microspongia present. These are pollen sacs, and in these, you can see these bubble shaped structure. These are referred to as the pollen grains. Now this what is the structure of a microspongia? The young anther, while it is still in the flower bud, in the TS or the transverse section, it reveals the presence of outermost epidermis. This is the epidermis, the outermost layer. It is the epidermis. It is very much thin and it is single layer, and it is basically for the protective purpose. The outermost wall layer lying just below the epidermis is called the endothelium. Now, what is the function of endothelium? It is a single layer of cells that has the character of dehiscence. Dehiscence means the release of the pollen grains once they are matured. The dehiscence character is due to their hygroscopic nature. So after endothelium, there comes the middle layer. They are mostly 1 to 3 in number, and they are mostly made of the parenchymatous cell. The parenchymatous cell means they are of living material. The cells of the innermost wall layer are radially elongated and rich in protoplasmic contents. This layer is called tapetum. So in the diagram you can see the tapetum if it's present. Otherwise I'll show in other diagram. No, the end of this. Yes, this is the tapetum. The tapetum is made up of the protoplasmic contents, and the tapetum forms the nutritive tissue nourishing the developing microspores. Microspores are the pollen grains. So tapetum provides nourishment to these growing microspores that are inside the pollen sacs. The cells of tapetum may be multinucleate or may have large polyploid nucleus. The tapetal cells provide nourishment to young microspore mother cells either by forming a plasmodium. Plasmodium are the amoeboid or invasive type of uh, uh, structures that uh, increase their pseudopodias and provide nourishment to the mother cells or the microspore mother cells, or by the other process through diffusion, that is by transferring their materials or into the microspores by just diffusing, or by just the difference in the concentrations, that is the tapetum has higher concentration of protoplasm whereas it is lower in the microspore mother cells, so the diffusion occurs from higher to lower gradient. The pollen wall sac encloses a large number of archisporial cells. The pollen sac wall is the microsporangium. The microsporangium further forms microspore mother cells, or the microspore mother cells are also called as the microsporocytes. In the beginning, microspore mother cells are polygonal and closely packed, but as the anther enlarges, the pollen sac becomes spacious and gets loosely arranged. A few microspore mother cells become non-functional and are finally absorbed by the developing microspores. So those microspore mother cells that have become non-functional, these are absorbed by the developing microspores to increase in size. Now we'll discuss the microsporo. First, let's see the diagram of microsporangia. The anther sacs. microspores are present inside it. These are also called as the microspore mother cells, which consist of microspores or the pollen grains. This is the filament, the anther, the typical diagram of a stamen. So the microspore mother cell consists of the microspore, the pollen grains, and the tapetum is surrounding it. Tapetum provides the nourishment. The fibrous layer or the endothecium, that is mostly used in the dehiscence or the oozing out of the pollen grains after they have attained maturity. The epidermis, the outermost layer, mainly it is for protective. It is protective in function and provides protection to the growing microspores. Now we'll discuss the microsporogenesis. I told you what is microsporogenesis. That is the formation of microspores from pollen mother cells by meiotic division. So during microsporogenesis, the nucleus of each microspore mother cells undergoes meiosis and gives rise to 4 haploid nuclei, the microspore tetrad. These 4 nuclei are arranged in the tetrahedral manner, forming forming tetrahedral tetrad. A tetrad is something that are arranged in a cluster form, and tetrad means 4 in number. So whenever one microspore divides, it forms by the process of meiosis, it forms 4 microspores separately, and these 4 separate microspores then are separating from each other and usually develops a characteristic shape or form. Then these are different in different species. So now when the microspores they are once formed, then they are separating from one another gradually with time, and after some time they possess different shapes according to the species in which they are present. So these microspores are the pollen grains. So you can see in the diagram the shape of a pollen grain, it is spiny. So there are many different shapes that are the sculpturing. It is called the sculpturing of a pollen grain. Sculpturing means the outer wall, that is the exine, that is very much hard, and it is usually for protecting it from the different organisms, other animals or other plants. Pollen grains are spherical in shape. It has 2 layers, the outer exine and inner intine. The exine is for protection, and the exine is made up of an organic compound, sporopollenin. It is the hardest substance. As already discussed, pollen grains develop from the diploid microspore. So mother cells in pollen sacs of anthers, typically pollen grain is a haploid unicellular body which have a single nucleus. Pollen grains are generally spherical, measuring about 25 to 30 micrometers in diameter. The outer surface of microspores may be spines. These are the spines that is shown in the diagram. There can be ridges or furrows which may vary in other ways in different species. They may be oval or ellipsoidal, triangular, lobed or even crescent shaped pollen grains. The cytoplasm is surrounded by a 2-layered wall. The outer layer is called exine and it is sculptured or smooth. Sometimes the sculptures may not be present and the wall is completely smooth according to the species in which it is present. There are some species which do not need protection, so the wall is smooth. But if the species is growing in such an area that the protection is required, then the sculpturing is present. The exine is cuticularized and the cutin is of a special type called the sporopollenin, which is resistant to chemical and biological decomposition. So that's why pollen grains are usually found in fossils in large numbers, because of the presence of this sporopollenin that is resistant to any chemical or biochemical decomposition. In insect pollinated pollen grains, the exine is covered by a yellowish, viscous and sticky substance called pollen kit. This is because of the reason that once insect is visiting a pollen, whenever it sits on it, then that sticky substance, because of the presence of that sticky substance, the insect gets stuck to it and it carries away with it the pollen grain, so that the process of pollination could be made easy. Pollen grains are well preserved as fossils, as I told you, because of the presence of sporopollenin. At certain places, the exine remains thin. There are some places where this outer layer exine is thin. The thin areas are called the germ pores when they are circular, and the outline are called germ furrows when they are elongated. So if they are circular, they are called germ pores, and once if they become the shape of a longitudinal shape, they are called the germ furrows. The cytoplasm is in starch and unsaturated oils. The uninucleated protoplast becomes 2 to 3 layered at the later stage of development. The branch of the study of pollen grains is called the palynology. In some flowers, for example, orchids and calotropis, the pollen of each anther lobe form a characteristic mass called pollinium. So the pollinium is provided with a stalk called cortical and sticky base disc called a corpusculum. The This brings us end to the of the microsporo development of male gametophyte, the pollen grain. So now as the pollen grain matures, it contains two cells, a bigger vegetative cell and smaller generative cell. The generative cell divides mitotically into two male gametes. So one pollen grain is forming two mature male gametes. So how does the development of male gamete occurs? The development of the male gamete starts in the pollen grains while it is still present in the microsporangium or the pollen sac. The microspore undergoes only two mitotic divisions. First mitotic divisions lead to the formation of vegetative cell and a generative cell. This in the diagram you can see. Then vegetative cell is also called as the tube cell. The vegetative cell is bigger and has abundant food storage and large irregular shaped nucleus. These cells do not possess any cell wall, hence represented only by cell membranes. So the vegetative cell is the cell which is bigger in shape and contains the abundant amount of food reserve. The temporary callose wall is laid down between these two cells, that is the vegetative cell and the generative cell. The wall to separate these two is made up of callose. The callose wall spreads between the generative cells and the intine to finally pinch it off. Now soon the callose wall dissolves and generative cell lies freely in the cytoplasm of the vegetative cell. This callose wall once dissolved, then the generative cell that is formed, which is smaller in size, also gets dissolved or gets into the cytoplasm of the vegetative cell that was the bigger one. Now generative cell may be elliptical, lenticular or even spindle in shape. The cytoplasm contents of generative cell are almost hyaline and do not possess much of the stored food material. So the food material storage is done by the vegetative cell and generative cell is present now inside the vegetative cell. The larger vegetative cell contains fat, starch and some type of protein granules. It is usually at this two cell stage that pollen grains are liberated from the pollen sacs of the anther lobes. Now the two cell stage refers to the generative cell and the vegetative cell. When the pollen grain at this stage, then it is liberated or released out from the pollen sacs, and this releasing is also called as the dehiscence of pollens. Rarely, generative cell may further divide to form two male gametes. So the male gametes now are formed from the generative cell, not the vegetative cell. Vegetative cell is only for providing nutrition to the generative cell, and once generative cell has absorbed much nutrition, now it further divides into two male gametes. Other stage for the development of pollen tube and etc. They occur on the stigma after pollination. Now the complete maturation of the pollen or the male gametes occur on the stigma of the flower. So that we'll discuss once we'll complete the all the parts of a female reproductive system in flower. So that is all for today. Thank you.